So welcome to the Occupy Climate Change launch. And as I'm speaking, Marco, if you can pay attention to the waiting room, that's great, and help me out. So finally, here we are, 15th of March, and we're happy to have several of the researchers, the core team of the Occupy Climate Change, and also several students and activists and collaborators who have been part of the project. And we're very happy that all of them are here today and will present their experience with the project. And then we will also show the Atlas of the Other World, which is our platform where we are continuously collecting urban grassroots initiatives and city initiatives that are tackling climate change across the globe, but also collecting people's creative stories of the future. And let's see, now more people have joined. I will share the agenda of today in a sec. So I think you can see the agenda now, and I can just mention shortly that we'll have a break at 13:35, a 10-minute break, just to have time so that we're not Zoom fatigued. But we will start with an introduction to the OCC project. But first, I would like to present Anja Kaijser, which is the Senior Research Officer at Formas, which is a government research council for sustainable development. And Anna, you will be presenting the National Research Program for Climate, if I'm correct. So Anna, if you want to, the word is yours. So please.
Yeah, thank you. I have a presentation that I was planning to show. Let's see if I can do that. Do you see it now? But I guess maybe it's not in presentation mode. Let's see.
Yeah, we still see the sides, but
yeah, I don't know how to do that.
If you press on the lower bar, this icon there, yeah.
I tried to do that.
Okay.
Now it works, I think.
For me, it doesn't work, no. But I'm not used to. I know that Lise Sedrez just had this problem, so maybe she can share what she did.
Anna, go to the green thing and the top that about share your screen. It's going to probably show you, and when you click that, it's going to go back to show that that screen with several options, and then you can select for the presentation. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. That was helpful. All right. Yes. As Anja said, my name is Anja Kaijser, and I'm a senior research officer at the Research Council Formas, and one of the 3 coordinators of the National Research Program on Climate, through which this project, Occupy Climate Change, is funded. And I'm very happy and honored, of course, to be invited to this exciting event to just say a few words about Formas' engagement on climate research, and particularly the National Program on Climate Change. I will not be able to stay for the whole event, unfortunately. I will leave after a while, but I will try to stay for a while at least. Okay, so Formas actually funds a lot of research on climate change, and a major part of this is channeled through the National Research Program on Climate, which is one of 13 national research programs initiated by the Swedish government to address various societal challenges. And we have funding between 2017 and 26, and we'll see what happens after that. But currently our budget is 230 million Swedish crowns per year, which makes us by far the largest national research program. When the program was started, they made a mapping of what kind of research had been funded on climate change up to that point, and it turned out that was about 90% natural science and technology. So in order to try to fill that gap or address that knowledge gap, we have kept a main focus on societal and cultural aspects of climate change, although we also fund some natural science projects. We have some quite ambitious program goals to provide knowledge for a radical transformation of society that addresses the climate challenges, a rapid reduction in emissions to net zero and in the long-term negative emissions, climate change adaptation with increased robustness and reduced vulnerability to the consequences of climate change, and climate actions that are undertaken in line with long-term sustainable development where no one is left behind. Of course, we will not be able to realize these goals alone, but so the idea is that they need to be understood in a wider societal context, and the program is carried out in collaboration with a lot of other actors. So as I said, our main task is to fund research. So far we have funded 170 projects through 19 different calls, so that's quite a lot. And of course we cannot follow all of this closely, but we are very happy when projects contact us, like in this case, to tell us about their activities and also to invite us to events, and we try to attend when we can. And it's fantastic. I'm so excited to see the diversity of research being carried out within this program. It's really fantastic to see. So we fund research, but we also act like the spider in a web of research funders and researchers and other actors working on climate change. So we try to also be kind of knowledge brokers and like provide a node for knowledge about climate change, and the bridge between researchers and other societal actors. So we organize seminars and events and like try to attend other people's events and keep ourselves up to date regarding the current knowledge about climate change. Yes. We have some interesting calls out right now that might be of interest to some of the people here. Yeah, I won't read them all out, but you can see them here, and you can also find them all on the Formas webpage. The last one here, the annual open call, is not part of the research program on climate change, but the open call that Formas has every year. And there is a specific panel for climate research within that call. So that can be interesting for you as well. If you want more information about this research program, we have our webpage that you can visit, and you can also email me directly with any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, no, I was a bit quick, but yes, Formas has been generously funding the OCC the Occupy Climate Change project. So great that you could be here with us and tell us more about the National Research Program on climate. Okay, and before I go over to Marco, I just wanted to present myself, which I also forgot. My name is Anja Rieser, and I work at the Environmental Humanities Laboratory at KTH. And there I work with Marco, the director of the lab. So now the word is yours, Marco, who will give us an introduction to the Occupy Climate Change.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anja. And I am trying to share my screen now. And I hope that everything will work well. Actually not, because we tried, of course, a second, but now, yes, let's see if I can share my screen. So it's here. Sorry for this, but for some reason, I cannot find the PowerPoint that is here, but for some reason I cannot see it.
Yeah, and while you're looking for it, I can just say if we'll also at the end have a Q&A section. So if there's any questions, you can ask them. But if you want during the presentation, you can also write in the chat, but we might not always see the chat. So both options are available.
Yes. Well, apparently my PowerPoint disappeared from the, let's see if I can do something, otherwise it's not so relevant maybe. Now I think that you can see my screen, no?
Yeah, now we see a big version of me.
Exactly. So it's like it was before, and I can try one last time. No. Okay, so maybe we do without the PowerPoint today. We do something new. It's a bit stressful because we tried, of course, before we started and it was working, but I don't know. I think it's like something very strange happening sometimes with the sharing of the screen, and apparently it doesn't always work. So anyway, first of all, I want to not to take more time than I was supposed to. Okay, so while maybe one thing that we can do, Anja, is that I can send you the PowerPoint and see if you can share it. Is it a good idea?
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe we can try to do in this way.
Do that.
And see if it could work. It's but it will take us a little bit of time. I don't know if it's a good idea, but yes, maybe it will take too much time for us. So anyway, so first of all, many thanks to Formas, which funded our project, and to all of you to be here today with us for talking and discussing with us about the Occupy Climate Change project. My presentation is organized in two parts, the theoretical background of our project and a short presentation of the project. So let's start, first of all, with the theoretical presentation, the background of the project. So Occupy Climate Change challenges three mainstream assumptions about climate change. The narrative of the future apocalypse, the first one. The second, the scale of intervention regarding climate change. And the third is what I would call the apolitical consensus, or if you prefer, we can say the binary opposition between climate change denialists and all the others. So let's start with the first, right? I said that the first is the mainstream assumption about the future apocalypse. Especially in the global north, where we live, there is a growing narrative about the future climatic apocalypse. Science fiction narratives help to project fears and anxieties into the future. It is not just a matter of science fiction, though. Think about the Brundtland report, for instance, and the aim to leave enough resources to the next generations, the generation to come. This is an almost comfortable apocalypse, isn't it? Because this future apocalypse does not touch us too much, at least us in the global north. And it is just a way for us to be better environmental citizens, as well as it might well serve this apocalypse projected in the future, well serve to impose an emergency regime that will deploy the expertise and technical apparatus to save us from the apocalypse. The second mainstream, Occupy Climate Change, what Occupy Climate Change does with this narrative. Occupy Climate Change challenges the apocalypse discourse on several levels. From a temporal scale perspective, Occupy Climate Change acknowledges that for indigenous people, the apocalypse is in the past, not in the future. As Kyle White, a very influential indigenous scholar, has written, it is crucial to interrogate the ways in which those indigenous communities have survived their apocalypse. Also, the apocalypse is not in the future, but is happening now. It is, of course, often displaced, occurring far away from where most of us live, but it is not always happening far away, actually. In all our cities, subaltern people, subaltern communities, other species are paying now the price to climate change. Sometimes I should also say that those subaltern communities, other species, sometimes they are also paying the price, not only for climate change, but also for measures tackling climate change. This is maybe something that we don't consider. Sometimes we do not consider that. So we need to shift from a prophecy kind of discourse to an historical discourse, rather than this projection into the future. The second narrative that Occupy Climate Change is challenging concerns the scale of intervention. Climate change is the realm either of state and global interventions or of individual choices. The politics of climate change seem to be made at the COPs, at the Conference of Parties, or in the supermarket, or maybe since we are in Sweden, we could say, planning our next holidays, right? So it's there where we do our politics about climate change. We wish to recover both the power of collective actions and the community experiences happening everywhere. Although we are deeply committed to a grassroots approach, we also look at the experiences of local governments, local institutions, municipalities, because these two levels often are actually well intertwined with each other. The other mainstream discourse that Occupy Climate Change has been challenging is the issue of what I call the political or apolitical consensus. Eric Swingedo, among other scholars, has argued that climate change has become the ultimate post-political discourse device. A space of hyper-consensus where the only thing needed is to follow the guidance of the experts. Now, Occupy Climate Change is not against experts, against technology or anything like that, right? But we do believe that acknowledging human-induced climate change still leaves a lot of room for diverse, even antagonist political options. In my slide, if I was able to show my slide, I had, the idea that if you think of climate change as something real happening, you can have, maybe nuclear power plants. Apparently, this is one way in which the European Union is thinking, and you can have degrowth. So in both cases, we are considering climate change as real and happening due to human intervention. But you have completely divergent political options, like degrowth and nuclear power plants. But the slide was much better than I am now describing to you. As I mentioned above, without a strong political stance on social justice and democracy, climate change measures can also worsen conditions for subaltern communities and non-humans. Just think of red schemes or gated communities and gentrification, or you can think of taxes hitting the commuters living outside the center of the cities and not the fossil fuel corporations, for instance. Looking at grassroots and local innovation, we mobilize the diverse options on the table, sometimes antagonistic to other ways to tackle climate change. At this point, I would start the second part of my talk, which is dedicated to presenting the project. Occupy Climate Change has researched the collective initiatives tackling climate change, mostly in the urban environment. The project has explored the practices and experiments of grassroots organizations, as well as the policies implemented by municipalities. So Occupy Climate Change overarching question is, how can society at large adopt, nurture, and learn from those grassroots and diffused innovations? The project is aimed at uncovering, at times fostering, those experiments that are generally less visible in climate politics. The underlying hypothesis is that they produce practice and cultures going beyond both the mainstream techno fixes and the allegedly apolitical solutions discourses. Research has been conducted through interviews, oral history, focus group, Q methodology, participant observation, and textual analysis. During the research, the team has recognized the relevance of imaginaries and has developed a creative offshoot of the project devoted to understanding how people, especially university students, but not only them, imagine the future of their cities. Both social and narrative experiments have merged into the Occupy Atlas of the Other Worlds, and Anja will present the platform in a moment. Occupy has surveyed three typologies of climate change intervention: municipal initiative, grassroots initiatives, and speculative imagination. Those three typologies are traversed by four diverse but not opposite threads: institutional, social innovation, symbolic, and confrontational. We can see that these four categories, as gravitational points rather than separate categories. Gravitational points in the sense that different initiatives might gravitate more towards one, institutional, social innovation, confrontational, whatever, and others are gravitating more towards other points of gravity, but they often wedged one into the others like a puzzle. Often the border between these categories are also blurry. A grassroots social innovations can acquire a symbolic status, or it might be subsumed by the municipal government. The urban gardening project that Occupy has survived are telling example of these, often born from grassroots initiatives. They have been institutionalized and or radicalized, especially when connected to broader issues, for instance, to industrial food production and distribution. Building upon a multidisciplinary and multi-site empirical research, Occupy major theoretical contribution, and here I should more or less close, I need just 1 minute, I guess. Theoretical contribution has been the development of the category of urban climate insurgency. This expression refers to the ensemble of grassroots initiatives that aim to tackle climate change from a radical position and take the city as a primary locus for action. It is insurgent, not in the sense that it implies violence, but it implies a radical rejection of the current socio-ecological system, often acting beyond the limits. And the case of the project will be presented later on, so I would stop here and I don't take more than 1 minute, more than I was supposed to, and I am looking forward to the discussion with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Great. So before we share more of the experience and the research findings from the project, I will just maybe briefly show how the atlas works. I will share the website in the chat as well, but then I will share my screen. And I think that you all should be able to see the atlas now. And this is our research website, and I don't think you mentioned the exact five case studies, which are the core case studies of the research project, which will be presented later by everyone who has been part of those case studies, which is Naples, Rio de Janeiro, Istanbul, Malmö, and New York. So how to see the different entries, there's several ways to navigate it, but the map is at least helpful in showing where the entry is from. And you can either, if you want to see what's in with one location, you can click on view, for example, Kolkata. You can click on view all stories, and that will bring you to this page where one gathers all the entries that are connected to Kolkata. And how we have done it then is that you are able to either see the whole entry, and yeah, I'm going a bit straight into details, so it will be more clear later on, but what we have done is that we've opened up for students in different collaborations that can send in their entries, and that can be both entries that are regarding grassroots initiatives or city initiatives, but also these speculative or creative entries. So this is what I'm showing now. So either you can see all details and read the entry right here on the page, or you are able to click on these icons and then you will get up the PDF. So we've tried to make it in this way so that you're both can just read directly on the website, but can also download the entries direct to your computer. So this is a way to just explore on the map where we got in different entries, and also these main case studies are also visible at the map. Another way to just see the different entries if you're not into maps is that you can click the 3 categories below, and then you will see all the entries that are within these categories. So if I click grassroots initiatives, you'll still have the map above, but you will see all the entries that have been put that are grassroots initiatives. So that goes for all the 3 different categories that Marco mentioned. But you can also navigate yourself up here at the menu bar. And as mentioned, the core case studies that we will learn more about later. If you go to, for example, Naples, you will get a short summary of what the Naples case study has been looking into, but also all the publications that have been done within that project or that case study, and articles in popular press. And then you will also see all the entries that are associated with Naples in that city. And here it's both a combination of entries such as the creative stories, where here we see a creative story by Marco that he has written. But you also see different planning and strategic documents that are showing sort of what are the aims and strategies within that city. So to see how they are tackling and dealing with climate change. And if you go onwards on the menu bar, Occupy Climate Change Goes Global, where we'll have several people speak later, is when we sort of opened up the project for global collaborators and didn't just have it within these 5 case studies. And there you see several, also see all the different cities where we've gotten entries from, the city and the grassroots entries. So there it's the same, where you can see, if you go into Stockholm, you will see all the types of entries that have been sent in from Stockholm. And then if you continue on the menu bar, you will see all the creative stories gathered on one page. It's pretty explanatory now. I don't need to go into all the different entries, but in this way you can, if you're just interested in the creative stories, this is a good place to start. And then you also have the research page, where we try to gather all the publications that have been done within the Occupy climate change project and articles in popular press, which are all sort of clickable links. And then also for those who are very interested and want to see different conferences and academic presentations and academic teachings, you can see them all here, and also the public engagement that we've had within the project. There also have been some theses, master theses, written within the project that you're able to look at here. And just lastly, and I think Marco will also mention it a bit later, but if you want to contribute with any entry, either if it's grassroots or city initiative or a creative entry, you are able to contact us either by writing in the contact form, which is on the first page you come to, or you can send an email to the lab, which I will share in the chat now to everyone. Like that. Yes, that was that for now. Marco, is there anything else you want to mention about the atlas?
Thank you, Anja. I think it's perfect. You actually, it was a good trip, really into the atlas of the other boards. So I think that the invitation is precisely to join us. We don't think, I mean, we are talking about a launch of the atlas. So we are not thinking about closing up this project. It's not the way in which we work. Formas was very generous and supported us for these years, but we want to continue, and this is what we will discuss right today, precisely when we will present the Occupy Goes Global and so on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you for saying that. It's a living website, and we are continuously adding entries, and there are several entries that still haven't come up that should be there soon. So then I'll stop sharing, and then next on our list, I will give the word to Lise Sedrez from Universidad Federal de Rio de Janeiro, who will chair this next section of the program.
That's a bit of a surprise. I was so enjoying the presentation with navigating in the site, but then I have two wonderful young women that I'd like to present, and they have been together with me since the very beginning. We are going to go back later on, but an important partner with the OCC has been the university, right? And I was able to engage a number of students and colleagues in this last 3-4 years. I'm extremely pleased to present Leticia and Natasha, who have been my partners in crime since practically 1918. Natasha is one of the master's thesis that we obtained with this particular project. Her master's thesis is about the case study we have been studying. She's now a PhD candidate at the Fundação Oswaldo Cruz, Casa Oswaldo Cruz, a very important research center in Rio, and she stole Leticia from Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro, and Leticia is now doing her master in the same institution. So it was great to see them not only growing as researchers, leaving the nest. I still have not forgiven them for that, and created a group as well. I mean, they still are in contact with the people in the conference in the Babylonia Hill. They are in contact with each other, so they created an extra group of collaboration that's going to last for a long time. Leticia is finishing her master's as well. So, okay, I could talk about hours and hours about these wonderful women, but I'm going to let them present their own experience, their experience in their own words.
Thank you, Lise. I will share with you my screen. It's okay?
Not yet, Natasha. Okay, it's fine now. But again, it's not. It's in the PowerPoint mode, not in the presentation mode. Same thing, that same problem that we had with Anna. Go to the top and you can select the screen that you want to present. Click on the green bar on the top, and you can reselect the screen that you want to present.
Now it's sharing?
No, it is sharing, but it's sharing only in the PowerPoint. It's okay. We can go with that. Don't worry.
Okay. So I would like to thank you for the opportunity to be part of this group. And oops. Any problem? I can change the slides.
Natasha, let's see if I can help. See, there is on the screen, there is the volume, and immediately on the right, there is an icon. If you click on the icon, it should work. At the very bottom of your screen, there is a series of icons. There is the volume, and then before the volume there is one, which is like a screen. Maybe if you click on the screen, it should work. No?
It's okay? Because for me, it's working.
Not yet. Oh. No.
No?
No. Do you want to send it to me, Leticia, Natasha, and I can show it?
Okay. I will stop share.
Stop share and send it to me by email. And then you can start talking about the experience and,
Okay.
and I show you. As soon as I get it, I can show it for you.
Okay. So the research process involved unique encounters. The visits to Morro da Babilônia were opportunities to get to know reforestation, but above all, to meet the people responsible for the resurgence, these urban forests. As a student, it was an important moment to understand the different ways we have to build a narrative, historical narrative. It was my first time I worked with oral history. Currently, I continue to use testimonies as part of my research source. The strength that the testimonies brought not only dynamism, but also brought life into this work. We had a meeting where we could talk about the research process. We shared all these the community. They were always respected and unbelievable curious about what we were doing, discovering. They wanted to talk about it. They wanted to know more about the establishment of the favela. Knowing is a way of belonging, being part of this history, and being in contact with people who were part of this process directly was impressive. The research involved listening, but we are not only interested in the testimony, but in the people. We made friends, we learned together, and we learned about the daily relationship of this favela with the environment, mainly about the changes in this relationship, fear, environmental problems, and later an example of preservation and appreciation of the reforestation. And the reforestation involved not only planting trees, but the placing and meaning of this forest in the lives of favela residents and help us to understand the state of community and imagine better and possible cities in the future. And this is Morro da Babilônia in Rio de Janeiro. You can change, Leticia?
No, it's
And this is our meeting in Morro da Babilônia. And now Leticia continues our presentation. You continues.
Hi everyone, can you listen to me? It's okay because my internet's not working today. So as Natasha was saying, most of our research, I think we did on the field. We went to Babylonia Hill, I think once or twice, sometimes a week. So we sensed that people trusted us because we keep going continuously, because they talk to us about other researchers that only went there once and then totally abandoned the program, made them some questions, wanted things from them, and then disappeared. And they will see only their names in their research if they search it on Google or something. So when we did the interviews, we saw and we listened to this community and observed them how the forest changed their perceptions about themselves. They had a negative perception about favelas in Brazil usually, and how the relationship, how the forest and keeping this forest alive changed their perceptions about themselves as a community, as a working community, and also from other people to see. Because I made a few topics to make this presentation very quickly. Otherwise, we will be talking about it for hours. So we saw in neighborhood associations and health assistance, in school assistance, in another administrations of everyday life for themselves, as summer break children and teenagers colony. We did an interview with women, and they were in a summer break. They were watching the kids play and everything. So, and we also saw that they if we had questions for them, they also had questions for us, because they were curious about how this university works. Because there is a building from Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro, from where we came from, near them, but they never went there. They saw from Babylonia, but they never got in. So they also had questions for us about the way the university works, about our job as researchers, about finally in one of our last meetings was in the university before coronavirus, and they were curious about how the research workers and other colleagues for us, we introduced them for another college. They take pictures. If we were interested in pictures from the forest, from the favela, from the houses, from them work, they were also interested in us. So we saw a kind of partnership being built through our presence in Babylonia. We also, Natasha had some photos of a lecture that we offer them, because we are continuous asking questions. It's not only what we need, it's also what you need from us. If you need to know about the history of the favela, if you want our papers that we were doing, if you want any pictures that we found in our research, you could come to us. I think this is one of the key moments. They could come to us, they could ask us for what they needed, and we also ask them for what we need in this research. So I think this is very important to say. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha and Leticia. Okay, Marco, should we then, we had planned a 10-minute break. We're a bit delayed, but should we stick with the agenda?
Yeah, I think that we should stick with the agenda, definitely. So we will convey in 10 minutes from now, is it right?
Yeah, 5-2. Yeah.
Well, it depends, right? Let's say 10 minutes from now. I think that we are in different time zone, maybe, but please be careful. 10 minutes.
But it will be 5-2 anywhere. I didn't say 5-2.
Oh, sorry.
So that should be fine. Yeah. See you in 10 minutes, everyone.
Yeah. In the meanwhile, I am sharing now the PowerPoint just for fun. So if anyone is interested, but go and have your break. See you in 10 minutes.
Okay. That's 5-2, so I hope everybody managed to take a bit of a break from the screen. And yeah, then I will move on to the presentation of the core team and their case studies. Roberta?
Yes.
Yeah, Marco, do you want to say something?
No, I was going to present precisely this second segment of our launch, and yes, I am giving the word to Roberta. Roberta Biasillo is assistant professor of political history at the University of. You are laughing, no, because I don't know. Roberta is, of course, is a very influential environmental historian, but I think it's also very important that actually political history has been, how can I say, bringing on an environmental history perspective. And I'm very happy to say that Roberta is now an assistant professor at University of Utrecht in the Netherlands, and she was also part of the occupied team more or less from the beginning, I guess, because Roberta has been working at the lab for several years in the past. But I give the word to you, Roberta. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Marco, for introducing me, and thank you, Anja, for organizing this event in a very splendid way. Thank you very much. And also for working on the atlas with, it's very nice that you put everything together on the website. Yeah, and I also want to mention another colleague that was part of the project, but she left before my arrival, that is Ilenia Yengo. She also worked a lot, and now she has a PhD, and she's still working on political ecology with a feminist perspective. So this is more or less the team, and I'm also going to leave the floor for each of the team members during this part of the event. So I want to okay, I will share my screen as well. So you should see it. So this part I will open with some like a brief presentation of the publications and the outputs of this project. As Anja has already shared, we worked a lot individually, or we collaborated on code or papers. So as a team, we have published quite several scientific articles in the popular press. So we try to address different audiences, and also in different languages, from from Swedish to Italian, in English, of course, but also in Turkish and in other languages. And we try to publish in a very diversified venues. And of course, there are seminars, conferences, and presentations that sometimes we did together, sometimes we did individually, presenting our case studies. And yes, just to give you an idea of how much we have produced during these 3-4 years. So if you, as already Anja has present the website, there is a section where you can find all the publications we have done, and there are also publications in progress. I just want to mention two main monographs. There's Marco's monograph, Waste-to-Scene Stories from the Global Dump, published in 2021 by with Cambridge University Press. And then there is Ashley Dawson's book, People's Power, Reclaiming the Energy Commons, that has been released in 2020. So those are two main outputs, but of course, there are several articles in peer review journals and in popular press. So this was already more or less said also by people that precede me, but I also what I want to focus a bit more is the collaborative outputs of our group. So we have edited the special issue of Social Text, and we also are preparing an edited volume for the Amsterdam University Press. This will be open access. I will try to present them in a way that if you're interested in something, you can easily find it, or you can get in touch with us. Or if you're interested in the theoretical framework, this is something that, of course, for us is very important to present and make it public. Yeah, and okay, so this is the special issue of Social Text. Should be released soon, so in March this month. The guest editors are Ashley Dawson, Mark Armiero, Ethemcan Turhan, besides myself. So as you can see here, we have, apart from the introduction, I will go a bit more in details in the next slides. We try to include research from our team, but also try to involve people that were differently involved in the project. So we invited colleagues, or we invited people working on similar movements. In Istanbul, for example, we invited colleagues working on Istanbul, but that were not part of the project. And of course, there are like the introduction and the interview are more, can provide a bit the frame for the individual cases that are presented in each of the paper. And the rest of the papers are on different cities. So we have New York, we have Naples, Rio de Janeiro, Istanbul, and Malmö. So those are the case studies introduced in this special issue. So the theoretical framework and the way we tried to frame this special issue was to focus on the concept of the urban climate insurgency. Marco has already presented it a bit. With this term, we refer to like the different kinds of grassroots initiatives that try to engage with climate change and climate change politics, but from a radical point of view. Where those initiatives take place, they take place in cities. So those are the coordinates of our special issue. And then, as Marco has already mentioned, insurgent does not imply violence. Violence can be part or can not be part, but we use insurgent as a way to stress the radical rejection of the current socio-ecological system of the movements we analyzed. And then if we go back to the table of contents of the special issue, you can see that we frame climate in a very broad way. So within the idea of climate, there is energy, there is waste, or I don't know, there is fossil fuel, of course, but there is also like knowing as a way, knowing as a way to engage with the place and to try to create a different kind of knowledge. So this is a brief presentation of the social text issue. And the other main collective research output is, as I mentioned, the edited volume that Mark Armiero, Salvatore Paolo De Rosa, and Ethemcan Turhan are co-editing for Amsterdam University Press. This will be completely open access. So it's also a way for us to showcase what we've been doing. And these edited volumes stemmed from a workshop we organized in Stockholm, 2 years ago. And yes, it was March 2019. And it was more or less like a way to discuss and include our case studies with other scholars. So the idea is that the three main takeaways of this edited volume is that we would like to analyze the responses to climate change beyond the adaptive capacity. So when loss and damage that is one of the pillars of the Occupied Climate Change Project are inevitable and are already happening, how urban communities respond to that. And then another point that this volume will explore is the role of social movements within the politics of mitigation and adaptation. So do they have a specific role? How can they interact with the environmental governance? And of course, there are many movements that take place in cities. And another element that this volume will explore is the difference and similarities between the right to the city movements and movements with a stronger focus on environmental climate and environmental justice, climate justice and environmental justice. So yes, so those are the two main collective output. And the other part of this section is to introduce the work packages and the case studies. I use those two terms because some work packages are more empirical and they focus on a case studies, others are more theoretical. I mean, most of them are both, but I mean, you will see how we balance the empirical and the theoretical part. So this is the list of the speakers I will briefly introduce before giving them the word. So the first one is Ashley Dawson. Ashley Dawson is a professor of post-colonial studies at the English department at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. But Ashley is also a writer and an activist. Ashley, the floor is yours.
Okay, hi there, everyone. Good to be with you. Good afternoon and good morning. So, yeah, I'm going to introduce you briefly to the work which we did with the Climate Action Lab, and then talk about some of the outgrowths of that work. So the Climate Action Lab met over the course of a year on a monthly basis. We drew together activists from environmental justice movements in New York City, also students and professors from my institution, the City University of New York, and then also from neighboring institutions. And each of our monthly meetings was organized around a particular theme relating to key sites of conflict connected to environmental justice and popular struggles in New York City. We began with food, went on to talk about energy, waste, housing, and infrastructure, among a bigger set of issues. I'd like to show you a little bit of the work that we did to give you a sense of what happened in those monthly meetings. So let me try and share my screen with you. Okay. So here's the Occupy Climate Change City University of New York's Climate Action Lab website. It's hosted by the Center for the Humanities at CUNY. This is one of the projects that we did. As I mentioned, the first one was focused on food. So the topic was rethinking food justice in New York City. We had a number of visitors to the meeting, including Sarah Nafizi from Added Value Farms, which is a community farm in a neighborhood in the borough of Brooklyn in New York City that works with public housing, residents of public housing projects, what in Europe is called social housing, to grow food and then to sell it at local markets so that people from the social housing can get engaged in farming, can control the sources of food in what would otherwise be a food desert in New York City. One of the huge problems related to kind of food apartheid in American cities and broader forms of spatial inequality, and then can actually have some income from selling the products of their labor. So Sarah did a presentation, which we recorded. Here's some of the reflections that came out of our engagement with her presentation. Then we also had Michael Johnson from South Bronx Unite, an organization grounded in the South Bronx, which is where one of the biggest green markets of the city is located. Most of the city's food comes into the South Bronx and then is distributed to supermarkets and shops all around the rest of the city. The South Bronx also happens to be predominantly working class people of color neighborhood, and it's also an extremely low-lying neighborhood and is the site for one of the city's biggest maritime industrial areas. So there's a kind of confluence of different environmental justice and social justice issues there. Because of bringing all of this food in, the neighborhood has about 16,000 trucks rolling through it every single day, and that generates extremely high rates of asthma among local people. And when Hurricane Sandy struck the neighborhood back in 2012, many portions of the neighborhood flooded. And city plans to rebuild the neighborhood and make it more resilient focused on protecting the big green market complex, and areas of the neighborhood literally just hundreds of feet away from the green market were ignored in those plans. So Michael Johnson is one of the leaders of South Bronx Unite, an organization focused on environmental justice and in trying to rectify some of those forms of environmental racism. And as you can see from the summary of our conversation, the South Bronx is also coping with gentrification. So his organization has put in place a whole series of plans for what a kind of just form of urban development might look like that would involve local residents doing much of the construction work at good wages. And then the last presentation we had was from the artist Mary Mattingly. She did a presentation from her project Swale. I'm going to play a tiny clip from the project so you can get a bit of a sense of what Swale is doing, and I'm sure you'll see some of the connections to the things I've been describing that we discussed. Can you hear the volume? No? Oh gosh, I think I need to.
You have to go on the share screen button on Zoom. You have to make sure that you toggle audio. So if you go on the share, maybe you know this. Share
yes,
sound next to the left. Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. I always forget to do that.
No worries.
Okay, let's try it now.
My name is Mary Mattingly. I'm an artist and founder of Swale. Swale is a floating food forest. It's a place where people can come on and pick fresh food for free. It's on the water for a few different reasons. One is so we can actually purify the river water and use it to grow the plants. Another is so we can move around from pier to pier. And I think the most important reason is that the water is really the true commons in New York City. It's a place that's truly public where anyone can come, and the more people we believe we can engage in the watery space, the more we can talk about the commons and then land as a commons too. And we really want to ask, what could happen if we could grow and pick food publicly on public land in New York City.
New York has a policy that says that you can't harvest food for free on public land. But there's a loophole because it doesn't say that you can't do that on public waters.
Okay, I'll stop there because I know our time is limited, but you get the gist. And I just want to add to, and of course you can see all of this yourself and watch the rest of the video and explore all of the work that the Climate Action Lab did in much more detail. But what I'd just like to add is that the barge, which Mary Mattingly created as part of the Swale project, traveled around to parts of the city that are so-called significant maritime industrial areas. These are areas that have predominantly working class communities of color. There are also areas that are subject to galloping gentrification, and they tend to be food deserts. So in the shots that you see, the barge is near the South Bronx, in the very community that Michael Johnson is involved with. Okay, so bringing the barge to a place that's a food desert and showing what kinds of potentials people have was a really important part of the project. Okay, so the Climate Action Lab did the series of monthly meetings, as I said at the outset, and then we did one final culminating meeting in which we brought together members of the community that had been meeting across the year, but then also opened up to a broader public. The meeting was co-hosted by Arash Karwazad, who is an urban planner who is involved with the environmental justice organization We Act from Harlem in drawing up a kind of plan for resiliency building in northern Manhattan after Hurricane Sandy. And the result of that final meeting was the development of a kind of people's plan for climate action in New York City. And I want to try and share with you the People's Plan. Yeah, so here's the booklet that we created after that meeting. It's called the People's Plan, People's Climate Plan for New York City. And you can see here in the table of contents some of the elements of the plan. As you can see down on page 16, we summarized some.
Ashley,
Yeah.
we're not seeing what you are explaining, I think, or I'm not seeing it.
Okay, it's paused for some reason. Okay, thanks for letting me know. I'll try to start screen sharing again. I don't know what happened there. Maybe I'm overloading the system somehow. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll come back to the title page. Here you can see the People's Climate Plan for New York City. This pamphlet, by the way, is available publicly. We put it on the Verso blog, so it's there. And of course, it's also available on the Climate Action Lab website, as well as through Occupy Climate Change. So here you can see the table of contents, and you can see on page 16, as I was saying, that we summarized some of the different arenas of struggle in climate planning, including energy, food, waste, and housing. But then I also wanted to focus on page 12, popular planning. The plan is the process, because with Araş's help, we developed a model of popular planning. I'm just scrolling through so you can see the kind of richness of the pamphlet, which includes photos of many of the struggles for climate justice in New York City in recent years. And you can see down in the bottom left-hand shot, there's a photo of the environmental justice organization We Act, busy putting solar panels on the roof of social housing developments in Harlem. You can see above that the People's Climate March from 2016, and then on the top right-hand panel, indigenous sovereignty demands at a demonstration in Grand Central Station. Okay, so here's the plan as the process. So the idea was that the climate action plan shouldn't just be a one-off, but event over the course of a year, but should lay the seeds for more extensive processes of community-based radical climate action and planning. So coming out of that meeting that I told you about, that was a culmination of the Climate Action Lab, we put forward these basic principles of climate planning that could be motivated through grassroots forms of conversation and planning. And we continue to work with the city of New York and with City University of New York to set up hubs around the city that could engage in these forms of climate planning. It's not an easy process. There's a lot of bureaucracy to wade through. So, you know, there are many struggles, but nonetheless, this is the task that we've set ourselves. One thing that I'd like to share with you in closing is after the process that the Climate Action Lab put in place, one of the people who had, one of my comrades who was involved in it, Yates McGee, who is in an overlapping organization called Decolonize This Place, was involved in a very important struggle in New York City. That is the Strike MoMA campaign. Strike MoMA involved a series of events over 10 weeks to protest against the institution of MoMA, whose board is filled with extremely wealthy corporate climate criminals and criminals, you know, of various other stripes, you know, people supporting industries that are engaged in rampant human rights abuses around the world, for instance. So Strike MoMA developed a series of 10-week demonstrations where there were protests highlighting the role of the MoMA board and of MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, as an institution in general in greenwashing all these various different forms of abusive behavior, and calling for something akin to the climate planning process that we laid out in the Climate Action Lab. That is for centralized institutions that are controlled, they get public monies, but are controlled by wealthy individuals to be shut down, and for cultural and economic capital to be sent out across the city and controlled by people themselves, by artist collectives, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just going to shift from the Climate Action Lab to Strike MoMA, a pamphlet that is freely available online. I wrote a piece that was published in the online publication Truth Out about Strike MoMA and what it was doing and how its efforts connected to environmental justice organizations and to efforts to decolonize natural history museums around the world. So that's this piece, which is archived now in the Strike MoMA reader. And the Strike MoMA reader, I'm just going to kind of zoom through it, is an absolutely amazing resource which develops many of the themes that we touched on and shows how important thinking about cultural issues are when one tries to shift cities away from their emphasis on fossil fuels. So the Strike MoMA movement happened after Black Lives Matter, and very much brought to people's attention the need to abolish dominant institutions, to fight for racial justice, and to fight against the way that institutions concentrate capital in very iniquitous ways. So you can see many of those themes here just as I scroll through these pictures, the kinds of solidarities between activists fighting for the decolonization of Palestine, for the decolonization of Puerto Rico, and also for the decolonization of MoMA. All right, so I'll stop there. Thank you very much for your attention. It's really good to be with you all.
No, thank you, Ashley. It was great. And also, I think I really appreciated you mentioned the role of creativity as a way to be insurgent, and also the role of popular policy, or the role of popular movement and planning. So now I will introduce Lise. Lise Sedrez has been already introduced today, but she's a professor of history of the Americas, and of course she's a well-known and environmental historian. She's based at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, but she has worked in North America, Latin America, and Europe. And and she's an amazing teacher too, as we saw today. So the floor is yours, Lise.
Thank you, Roberta. And you forgot to tell them that we are co-authors. We are practically twins right now in the social text. I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if I can do this. Is it working?
Not yet. It's coming up.
Okay. So I have a big advantage that since Leticia and Natasha have already presented a bit of our project.
But we cannot see your screen yet.
Not yet?
No.
It's back.
It's back here. How about now?
No.
It's paused for some reason. I don't know why.
Perhaps just unshare. Yeah.
Yeah, unshare and share it again.
Try again.
Yeah, now it's on.
I don't pretend I understand these machines. Just they are against me and I accept that. That's it. Anyway, since Natasha and Leticia have already presented a bit of our project, what I was planning to do is to say how much we have grown with the OCC. And one thing that was quite important is the way we were able to deal with the partnerships. So here we see the different partnerships we have here. We have the OCC, the university where I created my network of supporters and collaborators, the CNPq, which is like Formas, a funding agency in Brazil, and it paid for some of the students' stipends, and that's good. And COP Babylonia, which was absolutely fantastic. The guys who did actually all the work. So, okay, this is not working as the way I expected, you know. So just a moment. So the point was not to the point is that we did know some things about Babylonia Hill, and that's what we did. We did know. We know that they have been doing an amazing work for 30 years of rejuvenating and reforesting an area of Rio de Janeiro. Contrary to the usual declensionist narrative of environmental history, the image on your left is the one that it's the earlier image. It's 1995, and the image in your right is what they were able to do. It's a 2015 image. So you see how the efforts of reforestation were actually succeeded. So that's what we knew about the community before we went there. We wanted to understand how, what it had created, how it was possible. And we found out much more than we expected. We have a saying in Brazil, the caminhante, teu caminho se faz caminhando. Walker, you make your own path by walking. And that's what we found out as we did our research. In other words, as you went there, as Leticia and Natasha told you, once a week, twice a week, we were shaping our research and shaping our own participation in the project that already existed. So that's what we found out. First, we found out that forests speak. This particular forest has a voice, so our approach to it was to try to interview and find out these different voices, the human voices and the non-human voices. And we did, as Natasha and Leticia told you, a number of different interviews with women connected to the project, non-connected to the projects, with the workers and the children, and a number of different interviews to try to bring up these voices that usually don't reach much beyond their own community. So forests speak. That was the first thing. The second thing is to understand that the planting was not only a planting, but it was part of the making of the community. And we had to understand that was part of a community to strategize their own existence within the city of Rio de Janeiro. So they have initial goals, and the goals were very simple. They wanted to survive, they wanted to be seen, and they wanted to have some money, alternatives of jobs instead of crime, which is something that's rampant in some of these communities. So they had to learn. Most of these people working in the forestation, they had experience in urban jobs, and they have to learn everything about how to plant. And that was the amazing thing. As they learned how to plant, how to tend to the trees, how to see the city in a new way, their initial goals, like for the stipend and just a job, changed it. They connected much more with the environment around them. And they were able to use this to gain visibility and a representation within Rio de Janeiro. I mean, they were no longer only the poor people living in the hill, Babylonia Hill, but they were themselves the guardians of the environment, of the urban environment. And that's something that they didn't expect to happen in the beginning. For me, this was critically important to understand that the project changed the people, and the people changed the project, the initial project. they got a stronger community by planting, not only because of the trees that went up, but because they discovered themselves in a different way. That was one of the most fascinating findings of our research. So you see that you have a more visible community as they were recovering the area. So instead of initial goals, you have new goals. The learning curving is there. They are learning all the time. I mean, they were learning something and then COVID comes and you have to learn how to react and to tend to the plants because you still have to go work even with COVID. You still have to tend the trees even if the COVID's there. They need the representation. Those were really hard 2 years of the COVID because some of their most important strategies had to be visible for the rest of the community, had to be rethought. And they created alliances. This is something that I was really interested because their alliances were in the beginning with mostly institutions. Human alliances were the human partners. They had the neighbors association, they have the city hall, they have ourselves, the university. But what they realized that they had also alliances with non-human communities. The trees, fruitful trees like Brazilian cherries, mangoes, food was something that was also, the access to food was enhanced by the planting. The protection to erosion was enhanced with the planting. The protection for to hot climate was enhanced with the alliance or with the community of trees. And not only that, animals, beauty, and for instance, that's my favorite alliance with the boa constrictor, which I think if it's not too close, it's a great alliance. It's a very good indicator of a healthy environment. It's important for the return of the boa constrictor in an area of Atlantic rainforest. It's a sign that things are working. And they were able to introduce children, school children for neighbor areas to this working ecosystem. Sometimes they had to prevent children from touching this living ecosystem. I had to do this with Leticia. Leticia actually wanted to touch the boa constrictor. So I imagine the younger kids also have this problem. So anyway, the idea that you are one community in a larger ecosystem and you rely on their partners, it's really something new. And that's another thing that we learned as we were there to study. And Leticia and Natasha told you how they were curious also about our work. We become part of the project as well. We were the ones who were giving them visibility, which was something that they desperately need. And we are now working with them. Natasha and Leticia are also working part of their own research in the PhD for Natasha. I'm now working in the council that preserves the area of environmental protection. The point is, we are part of it now, and we are not leaving. I mean, it's great that I'm very grateful, and I've told Mark it several times, that OCC gave me opportunity to reconnect to my own city in a different way and to this particular project. It has changed it, not only my research, has changed a bit of my life. So that's what I wanted to show you.
Yeah, thanks, Lise. And yeah, I really like the idea of beauty, this way of reintroducing beauty as a concept to rethink our relation with nature and with the urban environment. And that's how your project was able to challenge these long-lasting narratives, but also the social roles of the community members and the economic patterns of the place. I think it's a very complex part of the project. Thank you. I want to introduce the next two speakers. Both of them will focus on the city of Naples. Federica Palestino is an architect and she's a professor of urban planning at the Federico II University of Naples. And her research focuses on local identities and local actors in shaping urban areas and dealing with socio-ecological issues. And a fellow speaker is Gilda Berruti. She's also a professor of urban planning at the same university, Federico II in Naples. And she also focuses on the relationship between planning and urban informalities. And she is also collaborating with local institutions, for example, with the Campania region. So this has like a relevance for the project. Please go ahead with your presentation. Thanks.
Yes, one moment to share. Let me see if you can see the slides.
Yes, it's not in the presentation mode, but yeah, now it's perfect.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. So when we started the action research Occupy Climate Change Naples in September 2018, at that time, the scarce perception of climate impacts on the urban environment of Naples was largely due, according to us, to mistakes in global media communication and governmental approaches that resulting in pushing climate change away from the public discourse of the city. What we did as a first step consisted in surveying how climate change was perceived in the urban arena. So, from public institutions and politicians to citizens, enlarging our listening to association movements, activists, social operators and cooperatives, and even students and teachers from schools and universities. What we discovered was that due to exotic narratives such as the white bear traveling on the tip of an iceberg and to technocratic responses in a language of ton of emissions, climate change was not felt as a priority in our city. More alarming socio-ecological emergencies and only a few climatic effects on the core city and its communities enlarged this common feeling in people. In some opinion, the spread of the contextualized description was producing the effect of keeping the issue at a distance, as if home territories wouldn't ever be affected by a far phenomenon as such. In other opinion, instead, feelings prevailed of being defenseless in the face of something out of the individual control and independent from personal and collective behaviors. As a second step, we started mapping social gardening and ethic farming ongoing practices in the city of Naples, and especially in peripheries, in urban peripheries, which offered a clear example about the working of an aware do-it-by-yourself adaptation routines, convincing us that these micro-actions could nurture innovative policies of community-based adaptation. Even in this case, what we have learned from the experience done is the distance that kept climate change apart from the public sphere and the urban arena. So to completely depoliticize the issue, as if climatic claims had no reason to exist, being far from environmental justice and the related rights. In March 2019, the scenario changed due to the first global parade by the Fridays for Future movement, and as a consequence, the issue entered the local political agenda with the effect of gradually changing the collective perception of climate change. In this new framework, we felt encouraged to take inspiration from the People's Climate Plan for New York by Ashley Dawson in order to experiment a People's Climate Plan for Naples. Why not? In designing our people's plan, we started from assuming Naples as a fragile city in the south of the global north, living under the permanent threats of the economic instability. Our idea, accordingly, was promoting a set of action labs and learning walks in order to make environmental, scientific, technical, and contextual knowledge encounter and interact, providing opportunities to try hybrid environments and test experiments to combat climate change. What we are aimed at is making responses to climate change encounter and interact both from citizens in their everyday life and from public administrators in their governmental routines. In this sense, even the involvement of planning students inside our teaching courses and their training become crucial as policy and decision makers of the near future. The process of active listening, the process of active listening we have been implementing so far highlights that the weakness of the public administration affects the participatory approach, turning the lacking resources for governing into the apology of a do-it-by-yourself approach based on grassroots practices. Scarce collaboration and funds are put by the public actor, either in promoting civic engagement and in building the collaborative framework that is needed to help the city grow. In this perspective, if we should find keywords for describing the action research for the People's Plan, we would suggest education, active listening, support for mutual learning between technical and contextual knowledge, and support for innovative policies and practices. Our aim, in fact, consists of making popular wisdom, environmental awareness, and planning capabilities merge in order to prepare a social demand for safe, healthy, and just cities, and in the same time, encouraging local institutions to enhance technical skills and insert them in a general vision that fits civic aspirations. In so doing, caring for different kinds of public space becomes the tactic to promote social innovation, with the idea of filling the gap between local institutions in the role of public managers and users involved as creative prosumers of adaptive nature-based solutions. In this direction, the first exploration of the People's Plan provided the quantitative and qualitative data on public schools' open spaces by means of an academic studio on green adaptation. It helps rethinking these services in the light of suggestions coming from students, teachers, and the wider urban context where they are located, where schools are located. Moreover, the power of schools as learning communities gave the further opportunity to address adaptation through educational practices and learning approaches. Then the experiment was enlarged, focusing on the potential of different public facilities under the control of great numbers of users, of civic users, that were mapped as the triggering point of the first Climate Action Lab. It was held online on February 2021 as an open discussion launched to the whole city. 20 experts from different worlds have been invited. Creatives, cultural institutions, public officials working in planning, environment and health fields, academics, high school teachers, church operators, non-governmental organizations, cooperatives, and movement leaders. The objective was to share single experiences and competencies carried out so far by different actors to respond to climate change in order to co-design innovative actions in selected areas of the city aimed to enact cultural change. The event was only the first of a series based on the idea that sharing different experiences, competencies and feelings on climate change could be transformative for the city by producing and sharing social and technical innovation. Lessons we have learned so far show that empowering the contextual knowledge on climate change and enhancing the theoretical and technical competencies for managing the related impacts offer a promising driver for climate-responsive regeneration processes. In this framework, climate change is not to be simply considered as a technical problem to be solved, but as an opportunity to radically rebuild social, ecological, and economic relations in the face of the transition we are called to afford. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Maria Federica and Gilda. And I think we are a bit late, so I will just introduce the next speaker, that is Ethemcan Turhan. Ethemcan Turhan and I worked together for a couple of years at the Environmental Humanities Lab in Stockholm. Now Etham is Assistant Professor of Environmental Planning at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. And yeah, his main research interests are climate change policy, climate adaptation, ecological conflicts, environmental movements, and he had a very important role in the project. So it's my pleasure to leave the word to Etham. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very kind
introduction. And just a quick note, since we are late, let's try to be in our 7 minutes. Otherwise, I don't know if people have to leave. Sorry to interrupt you, Etham.
No problem. Thanks a lot for this introduction, Roberta, very kind of you. And also, I actually have to stick with the 7 minutes because I have a 2-year-old sleeping next door. So I have to make do before he wakes up. So this is a great honor and a great happiness for me to be here with you, albeit from a distance, mainly because I remember the very first day when the idea of this project came into our minds. And then when we spoke with Marco about this idea that this would be really exciting to pursue. And then we reached out to Lise, Ashley, and Ayşem and all other colleagues. And today we are kind of wrapping up at least the first formal part of the project and kind of opening up to new horizons. So this is such a big happiness for me to see happening. So what I'm going to talk about today is my case study in Istanbul. I hope you can all see my screen now. Basically, this is a research that I have conducted with my colleague Baran Alp Uncu, who is now working with 350.org. But he is one of those academics who was purged from the university with Erdogan's decree. So there is a part of academic freedom debate in our case study as well. So our case study on Istanbul actually took off from the idea that urban climate change adaptation is a matter of social justice par excellence, and that incremental approaches are not really enough to address the necessity, urgency, and the speed that's required by the burning social injustices in urban realm. And also this includes an attention into the questions of power and authority over public spaces in terms of who has authority and who can have power over shaping the future of cities under climate change. And in doing so, what we did was to think about the subjectivities of actors through an attention on power knowledge nexus, and through thinking with them on their visions, perceptions, and authority over the urban space. And this basically took us to the literature, as Mustafa Dikic says, by thinking of urban social movements as acting from, acting on, and acting in public spaces, which in fact end up producing new insurgent spaces. And this graph on the right-hand side is something that I borrowed from Linda Xi, a very influential scholar of urban climate justice. And the whole idea is to think about how we could shift from the neoliberal city towards transformative cities that will not only be equitable, that will have just adaptation policies, but also go beyond the human, non-human dichotomy. So our initial point of departure in kind of crafting our Istanbul case study with Baran was that we started thinking about the traditional approach of climate justice groups, which often start from deliberating on the idea of climate injustice, taking historical climate injustices as their master frames, and by positioning capitalism, growth, and so on and so forth as opponents, they come up with a prognostic that is the necessity of radical social economic transformation. And in this framing, adaptation basically implies decreasing vulnerabilities and also compensating for losses and damages. So the typical progression of climate justice groups goes as deliberation, action, deliberation, whereas we argue that new, particularly urban climate activism does not necessarily start from deliberation, but starts from action, goes to deliberation, and then moves to action. At points also reframing the method of climate change as a catastrophe, a bit more so on the moral side of things, and sometimes even kind of drifting into what I would call as politically dangerous territories, such as the notions of deep adaptation. So our research questions here were focusing on the preferences, visions, and shared viewpoints of urban environmental activists in Istanbul in thinking about what kind of a just adaptation, just urban adaptation they envision for this mega city. And in doing so, we wanted to understand the converging and diverging subjectivities they have to be able to identify the gaps and intervention points. So what we did with Baran, that's me and Baran at the middle here, was to conduct a Q methodology study. We started off by going through the municipal climate policy documents. Then we first conducted 6 preliminary interviews with some key informants that took part in the climate policy making and activism sphere in Istanbul. Then we reached out to 26 respondents representing right to the city activists, some NGO representatives, neighborhood solidarity members, academics working on the topic, urban planners, and municipal experts. We also held 2 focus groups with these people and also ran a workshop with graduate students, the one that you see on the right-hand side with the very nice ice cream logo. That was a 1 full day workshop with graduate students thinking about how to spatialize the notion of climate justice in Istanbul. The interesting bit here was that our empirical research was undertaken between the 2 election periods in March and April 2009, because in March 2019 in Istanbul, we had the municipal elections, which were won by Ekrem İmamoğlu, and then Erdogan didn't like the result of the election, so he annulled the elections, and there was another election for the municipality in June 2019, in which Ekrem İmamoğlu won by a much larger margin eventually. So this is interesting to keep in mind. So what we did was that we actually had the first Istanbul Climate Change Action Plan in hand. We came up with a list of statements, half of which came from this action plan, and the rest came from our interviews. And this is again from the first climate change action plan. You see on the left-hand side, actually, this plan was revised since then, and I will briefly touch upon how it happened as well. And we took this to our respondents and asked them to sort their preferences. And I will not go into the details of Q methodology here, but we ended up finding 5 factors, 5 different narratives that are dominating the debate in Istanbul among our respondents. So the first one suggests that climate change is serious, but it is not as urgent as other political issues in the city. The second one found that climate change is important. We know that, but it's a matter for the experts, kind of emphasizing the role of expertise. Third one focused on the role of local government. Fourth one focused on the even bigger role of the central government, and the last one suggested that it's a mixed bag, and then public participation is crucial. So how it worked out, just to give you a sense, is that for each factor, we have crafted basically a narrative line. For instance, for factor 1, this was shaped by these 5 statements from our Q study, thinking that, so the most dominant one here was the first statement, which suggested that considering the other burning political issues Istanbul faced, climate change is handled as a secondary topic. And also this factor was shaped by another important response, which suggested that planning horizon of urban struggles in Istanbul do not really include climate change. So basically there was a bit of self-reflection by the urban social movements here in thinking about climate change and kind of how to bring it on board for them. We also ended up finding 2 consensus statements in this research, as Istanbul being an international city, part of international networks, and also other public and private authorities other than the metropolitan municipality having significant roles in urban climate change policy. So some concluding thoughts. Basically, since the time that we have conducted the field work until November last year, actually there has been some political developments in the city, which led to a significant revision of the climate change action plan, mainly thanks to the push by the activists. And it seems that adaptation and urban climate change are now beginning to appear on the radars of urban environmental movements, even though there are disagreements about the lack of action, framing, and adaptation as a social justice issue. The most important thing that I would like to underline as a final point here is to say that we can clearly see that both local administration, activist groups, and others are now considering what I would call as climatization of urban politics by centering climate change in order to provide leverage to other urban political topics. So climate change is really being politicized in a good fashion in the city now, but we really think that we need a bit more clarification on these revised work. So I'm going to stop here, and apologies for going a bit over time. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Adam, and thanks for touching upon methodology. That is something we haven't mentioned so far. So the next 7-minute slot is for Ayşem Mert. Ayşem is a lecturer at the Department of Political Science at Stockholm University, and she's also a senior researcher at the University of Duisburg-Essen in Germany. And she is an expert in environmental governance. Ayşem, feel free to share your screen and present your.
Thank you, I will do that. And hopefully you can tell me how to make sure you don't see my notes and you only see the slide.
Yeah, we see your notes now.
Okay, then I do this. And then when I say display settings.
Yeah, it's okay.
Is this correct?
Yeah, now it's perfect.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot. This was such a lovely project for me because it also coincided with my first year in Sweden, and I had to collaborate with a fantastic set of scholars. So thank you so much for having invited me and making me a part of this project. I was a part of Lab C, which started as deconstructing the climate action plan for municipal governance. And the goal in this lab was connecting the global and grassroots influences on urban climate adaptation. The climate action plans have not been produced as fast as we expected by many cities, so that part kind of disappeared in time. But the general aim, what mechanisms help promote community self-organization, how such forms of autonomy may be both shored up and scaled up by civil society, municipal governments, and international organizations have been very much what I have worked on throughout the project. And the way we thought we would operationalize it was by looking at climate action plans, especially looking at how the result of loss and the recognition of potential vulnerabilities were changing the plans, as well as how grassroots ideas were being included, into these plans. And our questions were, does knowledge circulate across local and international scales? And do policy plans, knowledge, or imaginaries translate from one side to the other, especially across the North-South divide? And for fieldwork, I have spent some time at the HLPF meetings in New York and did a lot of urban transition related participation and participatory observations and interviews in various European towns. My main concern at the beginning of the project was how the response that the politicians were giving to a very lived experience of loss and damage was almost comical. It was lacking in grace, and it was certainly lacking in dignity in face of this amount of this displacement of the citizens, especially when the scale of the dystopian imageries we have started to see have started to become the whole of Australia, or the whole of Mediterranean coast. We have started probably being agitated about all this. So at the beginning in 2018, when I was talking about what I was doing in this project, I was thinking about how are we democratically going to talk about the urban climate adaptation and what is happening to cities, to citizens across the grassroots global influences. Because we were mainly noticing, as one of the principles of this project, we were mainly noticing that we're not thinking and talking and theorizing about loss in a meaningful way. What we're doing instead is turning it into a number of numbers, and loss becomes something economic, and all of a sudden people do no longer have the access to the narratives that allow them to talk about their emotions. So we started increasingly at this time seeing climate grief, climate anxiety, alienation-related articles in various news and scientific journals and magazines. And even after the pandemic hit, this focus on costs, especially financial costs and GDP losses, have remained to be the dominant narrative in the way we talk about adapting to catastrophic changes. So I decided to I've slowly noticed that one of the most important parts of talking about loss and grief was the psychological dimension. And as a political scientist, I decided to focus on it from a political angle. Following Vanessa Andreotti and others, I wanted to understand the extent to which the way we experience loss in our urban local climate change vulnerabilities, and how this affects the way we think about politics and our daily lives and our theorization about politics. And here, of course, haunting and fantasy has become very relevant, and we started talking a lot about specters, about futures, about the utopian and dystopian imageries, and of course, various different imaginaries have been produced in this process. And my attention shifted to futures and how we imagine these futures especially on what scale do we imagine democracy and climate change. Here I started talking about how plasticity could be a concept that represents our understanding of inequalities in the way we experience climate change. It's a concept from Marilyn Statern's work, and in the midterm conference we were having, I was talking about how occupying climate change was about changing the way loss is negotiated, insisting on a just recovery, and refusing to return to an earlier and deeply unjust status quo in the aftermath of the disasters. And then in 2020, we were talking about exactly this, that when the pandemic happened, and of course everything has changed. And I started doing a number of non-academic speeches about how we're feeling and how politics, emotions, pandemic, climate change affect the lives in cities, and how experiencing a number of losses becomes a very important dimension of modern social life. So the democracy in the Anthropocene has become the last issue that I started publishing on, and I wanted to talk about this in terms of dropping certain ideas, dropping the idea of a post-political environmental urgency, which causes eco-authoritarian arguments to return, and problematizing scale, problematizing a nation-state scale becoming the norm through which we reinvent global democracy to respond to planetary crisis, and going back to the polis, going back to the citizens. And thinking about the demos, that is more than human, thinking about the next generations as important stakeholders, thinking international relations no longer taking place at the level of United Nations, and rethinking democracy altogether as we know it. So if I have 1 more minute, I want to talk a little bit about how we can respond to these changes. One important finding, in my opinion, from this project was that institutions and societies can be resilient under swiftly changing circumstances if they're institutionally and ecologically reflexive, especially when it comes to cities adapting to climate change. And cyclically examining the results of their policies are going to be central to their future. Accountability and success in politics need to be redefined, replacing the image of individual politician or individual consumer with something that is a little bit more communitarian, a little bit more radical, and allowing for a pluralism that allows for contestations. And finally, the idea of a post-natural democracy has become increasingly popular, at least in my circle. So I started thinking a little bit more about how a pluralism in epistemologies can be an important part of our climate policy making. And in the end, the greatest challenge for democracy in the context of the Anthropocene, and especially with urban climate governance, will be how the extreme weather conditions and the impossibility of predicting the conditions of the future will make people feel. When they feel uncertain, when they feel insecure, are they going to drop their democratic institutions, or will they embrace the narratives that are pluralist, progressive, and democratic? And that's where we have to put our efforts as public intellectuals. Thank you for listening to me.
No, thank you, Ayşem. This was very timely, and thank you also for the reading suggestions you put into the slides. It was very useful for all of us. So last but not least, Salvatore Paolo De Rosa was a member of the KTH Occupied Climate Change team, and now he moved from KTH to Lund University, where he works at the Luxus, the Center for Sustainability Studies at Lund University. Salvatore is a political ecologist, he's also an activist, and he has a background in human geography and anthropology. And I leave the floor to you, Salvatore.
Thank you so much, Roberta, and thank you to everybody for arranging this fantastic event, a great opportunity to meet with old friends and make new friends, and share some of the work done within the OCC project. So I don't have a PowerPoint, so you will have to watch my face or turn off the screen if you prefer. And basically what I'm gonna do, hopefully remaining within the time I'm given, I want to talk about the 2 outputs from my specific case study within OCC that is also the content of 2 different articles. And based on 2 different case studies. One focused on the first mass direct action against fossil fuels organized by a climate justice coalition in Sweden. And this article is forthcoming in the special issue of Social Text that should be out soon. And secondly, another case study focused on the challenges to transformative adaptation in the city of Malmö, and especially on the role of activism in creating the condition for transformative adaptation. And this article should will be out soon in the journal Cities, and has been co-researched and co-written with Joost de Moor and Marwa Dabaye. So Sweden, as you know, is one of the most ambitious country in terms of climate politics, and is considered so by the world. But however, under the shiny surface, complexities are plenty. Just to name a few, Sweden aims for net zero emission of greenhouse gases by 2045, but should have a rate of emission reduction of around 5% per year, even 10% if we want to take equity concerns into account, but it currently is merely 1% emission reduction per year, so falling very much behind their own commitments. Then there are several other issues, and some of these issues I've learned by engaging actually with activists on the ground and participating in meetings, but also in actions. And I just want to list a few. Then, for example, in Sweden, as in all countries that are part of the United Nations framework on climate change, only territorial emissions are counted and consumption emissions are not. But consumption emission in a country, in a rich country like Sweden, are very high. Then, of course, as in other places in the world, there is mostly a technocratic framing of climate policy and deployment based on the deployment of green fixes instead of just adaptation or just transition frameworks. There are also instances of green colonialism against the Sami indigenous people living in the north, and during the last year, also showing that activists are on something, Swedish activists, in criticizing the approach of the Swedish state. There has been an explosion in conflicts around the biomass extraction, also from primary forests in Sweden. So there are several controversial issues, and one of these concerns precisely the expansion of fossil gas capacity in Sweden. And so I focused on a case study and a climate justice campaign led by Fossil Gasfallan, that created a coalition called the Folk mot Fossilgas, that means people against fossil gas, under which it was possible to find many different social justice group and climate activist group like Extinction Rebellion, for example, and Fridays for Future. And basically their campaign had as a main target the opposition against the expansion of the gas terminal of Gothenburg, that was supposed to be also connected with the land energy grid, and so somehow locking in the country of Sweden to imports, especially from United States, especially from fracked gas in indigenous territories in United States. And this was actually a crucial point also in the campaign of the Swedish activists. So basically, I analyzed two processes within this campaign. First, the contestation of climate consensus, that is that dominant hegemonic governance regime of climate change that is not unique to Sweden but is global in scope, that puts together everybody under this idea that we can all sit at the same table and decide the best way to address climate change together with corporations, together with governments, and also civil society. But that is basically focused on techno-managerial, market-based approaches to the crisis. And particularly in this climate consensus, fossil gas is defined often as a transition fuel, so a fuel that should help the transition towards renewable energies in the future. And this is one of the points of contention of the climate justice coalition in Sweden. Second aim of my analysis of the case study was to better understand what is the specific role and the characteristics of a specific climate justice strategy, that is the mass coordinated action against fossil fuels, a strategy that has been made famous by coalitions like Ende Gelände, but that we have seen also utilized in other contexts like in Italy, UK, and the Netherlands as well, besides Germany. So empirically, I focused on the preparations of the climate camp and also supported the preparation of the climate camp organized by the coalition, and the action that has happened between September 6th and 8th of 2019. So I took part in several trainings, in the seminars previous to the action, participated in the camp actively and in the action, and I carrying out in the process interviews, collecting observations and other materials while there. So I won't describe in detail the camp and the action. This is the theme of a couple of popular article in Italian and English that you will find on the website of the Atlas, and also the content of the social text journal article. But I'll summarize the main findings and what is my conceptual contribution. So one thing, but must be said first on the action, it was a success, meaning that there were more than 500 participants, there were no arrests, no repression, no confrontation with the police, and the blockade of the gas terminal of Gothenburg lasted for 12 uninterrupted hours. Ultimately, this action, the campaign, helped hammering into the Swedish public opinion the unwillingness to have gas as a transition fuel by large part of the activist world, and also bringing concrete arguments. So ultimately, the terminal was scrapped by the Ministry of Environment about 6 months after the action. So it was a real success. I looked at these processes through the framework of urban political ecology, and this provided me with the conceptual toolkit to frame the work of the grassroots climate justice coalition and of the direct action itself as an instance of what I called a metabolic activism. So what do I mean with metabolic activism? If we imagine the working of capitalism and the way capitalist forces transform nature through taking resources and inserting them into supply chains and commodity markets, and the way urbanization includes nature into the working of the cities. Well, if this definition from urban political ecology of the city as a metabolic vehicle and of the economy as a metabolic tool to transform nature into commodities, then I posited that the kind of activism that target the metabolism of fossil fuel can be conceived as a metabolic activism. So with this, I mean the kind of eco-political engagement of activists aiming to disrupt, to block, occupy, and ultimately transform capitalist-driven metabolic flows and relations. And they do this by intervening directly, and that's the specificity of the direct action against fossil fuel, to intervene directly in the operational landscapes that connect different assemblages, so oil refineries, gas terminal, plastic factories. So all these nodes are integrated into the metabolism of capitalism, and especially in the metabolism of fossil fuel use. So this kind of activism intervene directly on these points, and at the same time experiments with alternative values, knowledges, spaces, especially in the camp. That is another typical tool of direct action that has also been made extremely relevant, for example, by the long-standing resistance at Standing Rock in the United States, where the camp became a true place of building alternative. In a small scale, it happened the same in Sweden. So I argue that these forms of metabolic activism and the very perspective of metabolic activism is crucial component of climate justice work. So in general terms, direct action for climate justice against fossil fuel may be the best position to counteract both the traps of consensus, but also to forward the just transformations, at the same time retaining commitments to fairness and equality. I show in the article how a metabolic understanding of the global socio-ecological systems assign preeminent political relevance to the transformation of the very flows, nodes, and spaces that structure the capitalist urbanization of nature. So the idea is that a crucial climate justice work is also about changing what is at the extraction and the production and the circulation points, because it's there that it is reproduced a certain arrangement of the global economy. And when it comes to fossil fuels, intervening directly on the node makes this extremely visible. And in fact, the issue of visibility and of making visible what is hidden in the landscape is one of the central contribution of this kind of movements. For example, what they did in their 3 years campaign and during the action was to connect the gas terminal specifically to the places of extraction of this gas that was supposed to arrive to Sweden. So in this way, they make it clear that the gas that will power Swedish house, it's also the gas that pollutes environments in faraway places and makes the life miserable, especially of indigenous people. So this work of connection is also what the metabolic perspective allows, because it doesn't see things separated from the rest, but it has in front, it has clear the interconnected nature of the global capitalist economy. So another element of this kind of activism is that they bring conflict and dissent again at the center. So somehow breaking this idea, we are all in this together, we all need to agree. What this kind of climate justice work brings forward is an antagonistic stance against the specific actors, financial interest, and material infrastructure that actually reproduce not just the increasing climate breakdown, but also a set of violations of social and human rights. What have been the main tools of this movement? Well, they used mainly counter narratives, using the media in a very proficient way, both social media and traditional media, but especially the blockade and the camp have been also the primary tactics of their political work, reconnecting also with the long tradition of civil disobedience. So in Sweden, Folk mot Fossilgas campaign has been able to mobilize, as I said, 500 events, and crucially also influencing the public representation of fossil gas and materially halting the terminal work. So what I wanted to highlight is that these forms of metabolic activism connected to climate justice are fundamental, in my view, to break hegemonic consensus around the top-down climate governance. So it is possible for activists to actively disrupt from the ground up narratives and policies connected to a sort of climate management regime that doesn't really help solving any of the issues, both social issues and climate issues. And finally, also a central work of this kind of activism is to make space also for other claims, other knowledges, other experiences, shifting the focus from the climate politics arena also to the financial interest and financial players, the material infrastructure, as I said, that reproduce the relation between the fossil economy and the climate chaos. And finally, the way these kind of campaigns also have an effect much beyond the actual event is by turning the experience of activism into a very empowering experience that is attractive for people who do not have a background in activism, who provides tool and training that make it safe and nurturing. Also, having intercepted and interiorized the acquisition of feminist theory. So considering also self-critique and the emotional weight of this kind of activist work into their plans, into their spaces, and finally making the very experience of activism transformative for those who take part. So another claim I argue in my article is to create a coming trained force of grassroots activists that will be crucial not just in counteracting climate injustice, but also in supporting within cities coalition to address adaptation challenges and disasters that are coming anyway. I had another part, but I will skip that for having finished time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Salvatore, you can actually continue because you'll chair the next section with Davide.
Okay, so I will just Davide is here, I think. He's here.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Hey,
Hi,
great.
everybody. Hi, everybody.
Hi. So yes, we wanted to have in this event also some of the voices from those activists who have cooperated with our project in different ways. And Davide has also been crucial in the organization of the OCC event school in Naples. For climate activists that in my opinion has been one of the highest point of this project, in which we were really able to have fruitful exchanges based on concrete issues and oriented towards creating strategies and tactics. So I want to just very shortly present Davide. So Davide is a referent for the Neapolitan branch of Fridays for Future, and an activist of the environmental committees of Campania in the coalition Stop Biocide, that also collects inside this coalition. There are several associations and grassroots committees, representatives from the church and from social centers. It's a very heterogeneous coalition, and together they also are fighting since more than 20 years against illegal waste disposal and contamination in their land. So, Davide, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Salvatore. Thanks, everyone. And hi, everybody. First of all, I want to say thank you to OCC teams and to everybody for this discussion space. So when we met OCC project for the first time and we start talking about Occupy climate change, there were not yet the squares of Fridays for Future. Fridays for Future arrives in 2019. Today is the 3rd anniversary of the beginning of the demonstration of Fridays for Future. So climate change was not yet the central theme of our generation, of my generation, surely, but it's the central theme of all generation. So only then it broke into our lives in a disruptive way. Perhaps he had already done so in a different form, in some way just as brutal in our land, in my region, the Campania. I'll tell you about my experience in my city also as an activist. I come from Naples. I come from a city that has experienced the tragedy of, it's called Terra dei Fuochi, so land of fires in English. The land of fires is more than a place, it's a system. It's a system made up of corruption, connivance, dirty money, organized crime, and calling politicians. So it is a system that has done and continues to cause hundreds of deaths, because over the years, the environmental consequences have destroyed people. And the drama of our land, the tragedy of our land took place in a poor region. And this is a central question. My region, the Campania, is a poor region where the health system does not work, and where corruption and speculation trying to poison the virtuous processes of change. So the land of fires for me, for our project, for Stop Biocide, and also for the Neapolitan Assembly of Fridays for Future, the land of fires is climate change. The battle against toxic fires is against the fires in Amazonia and in other places in the world. With Fridays for Future and with the environmental committees, we have built a virtuous synergy, thinking of the old slogan, think global, act local. For us, asking for climate justice and environmental justice at the same time is exactly that. I'm convinced, but everyone are convinced that the struggles in this historical moment are particularly interconnected. The fight against the climate crisis, the trans-family struggle, the student struggle for a school that truly educates them and does not educate them to work for free and die. All this is part of a single wall that aims to reverse the course and abandon the current model of capitalist development. In these years, also with the experience of OCC, Occupy Climate Change, we have occupied incinerators and storage sites, we have blocked roads, we have prevented large polluting corporations from speaking in our cities, and we will continue to fight. One of the central and for me most important thing of the project of OCC is the centrality of the cities. And so I think that in this historical moment, of confusion with the pandemic emergency, with the war emergency, I think that this is central to speak about the cities. I think that activist committees, the single Fridays for Future in our city will be the central hurt to a change and for a revolution against this system, but also for an environmental and climatic revolution for all of us. I think that we are a little bit late, so I am not a PowerPoint, and this was my contribution to this discussion space, and I really thank you again. And sorry for my English. I don't think it's the best English in the world, so sorry for that.
I think it was great, Davide, really. Also your English. And thanks a lot for sharing with us your contribution. Anja, it's yours. Or Marco.
Thank you so much. Anja, I think it's now the Occupy Goes Global, right? It's this part of the section. We are very late, so I want to apologize with all of you. It's so I don't take any time. I just want to say that, as I said before, we are not wrapping up the project. We are opening up the project, and I give the word immediately to Rob Gioielli, who has been one of those scholars who have decided to join the project, you know, like a train in our way, and has been very helpful in building up then the global coalition. So Rob, I give the word to you, right?
Thank you very much, Marco. And as I like to say, part of the global Italian diaspora, joined you from the United States, Italian American via Cincinnati, New York. Thanks everybody here. I'll keep my remarks very short. So a little less than a year ago, Marco had contacted me and a few other folks to discuss the possibility of doing what we would call a summer school around Occupy Climate Change, and specifically around the Occupy Climate Change Atlas. And we normally, these sort of events would be in person with a group of graduate students, primarily from Europe, but of course, because of travel concerns with COVID, but also funding, we decided to do this digitally. And one of those things whereby COVID has enforced improvisations and new ways of doing things. Ultimately, in some ways, it would have been better to meet in person, but we had an amazing event because we were able to recruit over 30 graduate students and some undergrads and professionals from around the world, and have a really amazing series of discussions and conversations over 2 weekends in January and February, and really engage on a level that I was amazed by, and bring people into these conversations about climate justice and urban climate justice, and ultimately help them think about things that they already knew about, projects they were already working on, and things they were aware of in their own communities, and truly fulfill the spirit of Occupy Climate Change to think about these possibilities. And so the students are finishing up their final projects of their Occupy Climate Change Atlas entries. And so I want to turn it over to Bruno and Katie to make sure they have enough time to talk about their engagement with this and their projects, because it really helps. I think it's great because it's a model for how something like this can move forward in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. I'm speaking from Brazil now, and we are in good morning time. Well, it's hard to follow after Rob, because many of the things that he highlighted are some things that we discussed also, that about the possibilities that the winter school has opened for us. Yes, we would have loved to be in person in an in-person winter school, and but I also think we had a great opportunity to meet and to exchange points of view and learn so much from different colleagues and teachers that presented the sessions. Well, me and Kate, we expected to share some points here, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. Just to present myself, I'm a second year PhD student in the Federal Rural University of Rio de Janeiro, in a program of social sciences in development, agriculture, and society. So it was, I think, my entrance to the winter school was motivated by this, and it also, I think, brought new perspectives to how my work, my research proposed in the thesis is going to develop. Well, one of the ideas that I wanted to share was how much we learned about the necessity to occupy the narratives and the discussions around storytelling, around the Anthropocene and climate change discussions. I mean, it was a very rich moment for all of us, and it was great to hear today as well, Ashley, Rob, Lise, Gilda, and Federica, and Marco, who were there during the sessions. And also, I would add the discussions we've had with Elena Pest and Hannah Musho on storytelling, and how all of this opens ways for us to talk about our work and this theme of discussion in different keys. One of the points that for me, especially because my work and the entry in which I'm working is about food systems and agroecology, the links around urban and rural areas based on food, and the access to healthy food to the population in the context of climate change. So for me, especially, these ideas of working on telling the stories in different ways were very, very important. This idea that we need to incorporate, or that we can gain a lot from incorporating what we call non-Western knowledge or Southern perspectives, how this comes to our discussion, how we can enrich the view on the climate change discussions, was a very important point for me, at least during the winter session. And I would say that I was and I am very happy to be part of it. And just thinking about today, in which we listen to so many experiences and so many themes in discussion, because I see this, and this is an expectation for how we continue with the learnings and the lessons of the winter school, how we can remain in a community of practice, a community of activists, a community of people who are thinking otherwise, who are thinking and proposing other possibilities to discuss. So just to give a very brief input, this from my side, I don't think we could talk on the behalf of all people who participated, but I think we were all very happy to be part of it, and excited to remain in dialogue in this community. So thank you. And I pass to Kate.
And I don't have too much to add. I think Bruno did a really great job summarizing the student perspective. One thing I'll say that kind of came up on our last day with Lise was the interdisciplinary nature of the work. And so I think it was, I mean, not only are all of the scholars that, you know, came and gave us presentations and sessions and shared their work with us, working in an interdisciplinary fashion, all the students are coming to this from different disciplines as well. So we're making connections across that way. The readings are, you know, interdisciplinary. Many of us were reading outside of our normal, what we would, you know, be engaging with this work. And then that just led to so many possibilities, not only in our projects, but sort of going forward. You know, any kind of work, I'm more convinced that any kind of work that is to be done in the climate crisis has to be interdisciplinary. So thank you I'm very thankful for this experience personally.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you. Thank you, Rob. I was trying to also be present on social media, writing what you were saying, but sometimes it's difficult because if you write, you miss. But thank you very much. And I believe that I am not completely sure because I couldn't precisely follow so well who is in the room now, but we should have Grace López, right, from Flaxo, that because we had also a very nice group of students and scholars and colleagues, friends working in Central and Latin America. I am thinking here, especially apart from, of course, the Occupy climate change team in Brazil, also of Nicolas Couvi and his students. So is Grace, are you there, Grace? Do you want to say something?
Hi, Marco, I'm here. I have a very
Hi,
brief
Grace.
presentation.
Sorry, I was not sure, but please.
No worries. Let me just put it here. I'm not sure if you are watching the presentation.
Yes, we can see the PowerPoint perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity of working with you on the OCC Goes Global, and I'm going to show you what we do in Ecuador to be part of this. I'm going to try to keep it very brief. So we were a team of 6 people from Flaxo, Ecuador, that is a postgraduate university in Quito, Ecuador. We were led by Nicolas Couvi, professor. In total, we were 5 students, 2 from social environmental studies, the master program, Gabriel and Kira, and 3 students from urban studies, the master program, and me, Pamela, and Katia. We wrote a total of 10 entries for the Atlas, 2 fiction stories. One was made for our professor, and the other one was made by Gabriel. We also write entries about 7 grassroots initiatives and 1 city hall initiative that I wrote. We cover 6 cities all around Ecuador: Quito, Cuenca, Ibarra, Puerto Viejo, Lago Agrio, and Galapagos. I think I would like to highlight that we cover all the country, like cities from the highlands, like Quito, that is the capital and a big, large city, and also cities from the Amazon region of Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands too, and also from the coastline. And I also wanted to share some of this, like my teammate perceptions and my own perception. For me, it was such a great experience to work for the Atlas because I'm an activist in urban gardening and urban agriculture. I'm part of the Natura Insurrecta, which is a political movement that focuses on class struggle. And since the pandemic, we built urban agriculture projects to feed popular neighborhoods in Quito, Ecuador. So this is the picture on the bottom. I wrote about that from the grassroots perspective view. And I also work for the municipality of Quito. So I wrote a city hall initiative that is the FONAC, the Fund for the Protection of Water, that we make work at the biggest ecosystems for Quito that provide water for Quito. So it's a water management program and also an educational program is the picture on top. And some of my teammates, they were saying that the thing that they liked the most about working with you guys was to to make this bridge, this dialogue between academy and civil society in order to face climate change. The people that wrote the fiction stories, they were so happy to use their imagination to think other possible worlds and to understand climate change from a bottom-up perspective. And also Pamela said that working with you gave her hope and belief that the sum of the small actions can help to tackle climate change. And that is important to bring visibility to the actions that actually people are doing. So climate change is not a topic for acting top down and only from a technical perspective, but from the people perspective. And this is a little summary of all the topics that we cover: active mobility, sustainable mobility, mitigation and adaptation practices, collective action, resilience, urban agriculture, sustainable food production, shared food supply chain. And yeah, I hope you can read the stories from Ecuador, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. It's really amazing what you have done, Grace, and I am extremely grateful. I just hope that this is the beginning, because I am really looking forward to continue our collaboration, our friendship. And I mean, what you said is absolutely, I mean, of course, I am not sure that our funding agency will accept this, but in terms of output, bringing hope to students is for me the best output. But I am not so sure that it's it's something that we can really fit in the final report. But for me, it's the best output to the project has been able to realize. And I have here in my agenda Mark, that could maybe share something about his experience. Mark has been working with Bruno Venditto, is based an Italian researcher working at the Institute on Studies of Mediterranean, based in Namibia. And Mark, are you around? Can you share your? Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, my name is Mark Sumphi. I'm speaking from Gaborone, Botswana. Okay, so I was graced with the wonderful opportunity to be able to offer my contribution in the form of a short story. For me, dreaming up what my city, Gaborone, would look like in 200 years, at first for me seemed like a daunting task. I can't even imagine what Gaborone would look like in the next 10 years, let alone 200. But I didn't need to look far, because I quickly noticed that the elephant in the room by the name of climate change. For me, I think climate change is going to be the #1 factor that shapes what all cities worldwide will look like. Climate change is happening right before our eyes, and our world demands change in the form of big adjustments that we all need to make to be able to avoid a rather disastrous future. This is exactly the message that I tried to bring out in my short story. It was a chance for me to put out into the world my thoughts on what a better Gaborone for me would look like if it moved in the direction of sustainability and thoughtfulness for the world that we are so very lucky to occupy. And as if writing about my city was not in itself a daunting experience, I actually have no experience in writing an actual story. Although I have for a little while now had the desire to be somewhat of a writer, I don't know where to start, and as luck would have it, I was presented with this opportunity to write a short story. To me, it seemed like a sign, and I couldn't refuse. To give a quick overview of the story itself, it's a story about my main character and heroine, who goes by the name Masego, who along with her husband fight for a better, cleaner city, as they remember it before, instead of the dirty and barely breathable city they currently occupy. In the story, I tried to pull from real-world events and problems, so it was no secret that riots and protests are flurry around the globe. So it seemed fitting that they would find their way into my short story, which I did incorporate. I wanted to feature exactly that in my story, where for Masego, it was a turning point and the primary reason that led to the change they had been fighting for, that they had been fighting for. The rest of the story envisions the new Gaborone through the eyes of Masego, who actually had not been in the city for a while and is seeing and experiencing the new city at the same time as the reader. For me, writing this short story seemed at first like a huge undertaking, and I felt I had no business writing a story, given that I had zero experience writing a short story. But I did it anyway, and for me, it helped me unlock a new side of myself and gain a new skill. But all in all, it was a challenge most welcome. I enjoyed it, and I honestly had a lot of fun writing my short story. With that said, I would like to say that I'm infinitely grateful for the opportunity to have been part of this amazing project. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah, it was very nice, ne?
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. We are actually very grateful because you have worked with us and you have actually given us a fantastic gift. And I posted in the chat a link to your story. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rob, and thank you all the people in the Occupy Goes Global project. There are so many others that are joining. We have mentioned our hubs in Latin America. There is a fantastic hub in South Africa and many others coming up. It's very late, so I should stop. And Anya, I think that now the word goes to Etham and you for, how can I say, sharing a final session with Q&A, comments, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. And as many people write in the chat, it was really nice to also hear the birds in the background. Etham, we were just opening up the floor to any questions that might have come during these hours. And again, apologize for the time, but great of everyone who joined so far. Etham, you need to perhaps leave soon. Maybe
Yes,
everybody needs to leave soon, but if there are any direct questions, please just raise your hand perhaps and unmute yourself. Etham, sorry, do you want to say anything?
No, I just wanted to thank everyone for this really exciting session. It's just so lovely to see all of this amazing work being done over the years. And maybe we could use the next 10 minutes before we wrap this up on thinking about the future directions of what we may want to do kind of beyond the lifetime of these formal projects, as they tend to end at some point. So I think it's a good moment to talk about these.
Yeah, good thing you said. Yeah, it's been great listening in and getting a great recap on what everybody has been doing.
Maybe if there are no questions, we could still get some concluding remarks from people if anyone wants to say anything and then just didn't have the spot to do it. I think it's a good moment now.
Well, I have been talking too much, so I don't want to talk again, but maybe just a very quick, again, thank you. Thank you to the team, to the people who have been in Occupy since the beginning, but I also want to really give a very special thank to the people who have joined the project, in this final phase. They have been very generous. To be very clear, we didn't have the funds at that point. So, we are really looking at a community that is getting together because it's interested, because it's something that we like to do, and because we see maybe a different way of making research, of being in academia, of thinking of our work, our place in the university and this world. So I really want to thank all of you. And I really like also very quickly this attempt, at least, I don't know if we are successful, but this attempt to merge teaching and research. Many times it's very strong, the division. No, if you go to a conference with a lot of researchers and you will ask somebody what we are doing now, the person will tell you, well, I am trying to write this book, this article, or the person will say, oh my God, I'm teaching now, I don't have time to write. And I think that what we have been trying to say is that actually we love teaching and we believe that research and teaching can go together. And this is what we have been trying to do, what we want to do in the future. I hope that the Occupy Winter School can become, you know, something a little bit, you know, more stable, and try to get together, you know, once in a while. We will see, of course, how much it is possible. But I stop here. Too much talking from me. Thank you.
Ashley, please.
It's been so wonderful hearing from everybody. What an incredibly generative and fertile experience this has been. Thank you to everyone for their inputs and collaborations. And, you know, it's been so great seeing comrades from the past and also seeing new people who've come into the project. Just responding to what you said, Etham, in terms of thinking about future stuff, it strikes me that we began this project when it seemed as if there would be Green New Deal initiatives on a national scale, at least in some societies around the world, in Britain and the US, the kind of Anglosphere, certainly. And of course, unfortunately, those possibilities have not borne fruit. And in fact, the current conjunction with the horrendous war in Ukraine has in fact prompted a renewed kind of assertion of the need for more fossil capitalism, right? So, you know, we're fighting against the idea that, yes, we need to get off dependency on Russian oil and gas, but that means we need more domestic production of oil and gas. So, you know, in terms of future directions, I would love to see a kind of conversation about, among participants about how resistance to fossil capitalism is playing out in specific cities and countries around the world. I know that we here in the United States and in many other rich nations have a lot to learn from what's happening in many other parts of the world. And I'm thinking specifically of places like Costa Rica and Uruguay, where there's been a very swift transition to 100% renewables. So that might be one potential direction that, at least for me, would be very interesting in terms of learning and political solidarity.
Roberta, thank you, Ashley. Really good point.
Yeah, no, thinking
Roberta.
also what aspects can be explored more, and I found very inspiring Ayşem's presentation, and I think emotions is an aspect that we haven't explored more, but from a political perspective, a way to frame emotions, and to be able to include emotions in policies and also in academic discussion. So if maybe if there's a way I would like to explore more about this climate crisis and climate responses through emotions, and is also something that is emerging in several humanities and social sciences at the moment.
Yeah, really good point. I think Lise and Ayşem was first, but it would be nice to also get if Loki wants to speak, since we haven't, since you're a listener. It would be great if you wanted to.
Anja, may I go?
I was trying to give the word to Loki, if I'm reading the name correctly. Yeah.
I found everything really interesting. It was really a nice school, and I came here from Extinction Rebellion, Venice, and it will be really nice to work together on the site and put some maybe stuff on what we are doing here as activists. And we are now in the middle of a really intense mass mobilization and community building made by Home, bringing letters to people in their houses and creating ecological presentation in everywhere near their house. And so this is the struggle this day. And there was a meeting, and I reconnect to what Ashley said before, with the Minister of Ecological Transition a few days ago. And it was he talked about the war, like the war is another way to push away the necessity of bringing attention to the climate crisis. It was like, oh, and now there is a war, and it's the worst time for a war because it will delay our attention on climate problem. And like, it feels that politicians do not realize that like wars will happen more and more on this ecological crisis path, and that we can't just look at the today emergencies days for days, and we need to look also at the bigger pictures. And yeah, we just want that our medias realize and inform people that this is an emergency, like they do with the war, like they do with the COVID situation, maybe better than how they did in this situation, probably. That's it. I really enjoyed the call. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Loki. And yeah, please come in contact with us. I'll share the email again if you want to share what you're doing. Now, Lisa, please, the word is yours.
I just want to follow up with Ashley and first say how privileged I have been for being with you for this last 4 years. And as I said, it changed very much the direction of my own research and direction also of my commitment. I'm also glad that Ashley mentioned the war more specifically because, and then Loki, because Loki is right. We are going to have more and more of this stuff in the, as terrible as it is now. And we're going to have more and more of this stuff and have to create some kind of resilience. I just got news from a very good friend who was doing some research, some work with the communities in Kiev. And of course, we don't know what's going to happen. At the same time, there was a very good friend of ours, Yulia Layus, who's doing very nice work in St. Petersburg with connection to other universities. They are completely cut off from the rest of the world. And that just convinces me more and more that how important it is for us to invest in the local communities and from the bottom, from the ground up, to make pressures on our governments. It seems amazing, that incredible and terrifying that the work that my friend in Kiev was doing for the last 3 to 4 years has been just destroyed by a bomb just now. And even they don't know what's going to happen. The same thing for Yulia in different ways. So it seems that it brings back the question that Marco was bringing in the very beginning, on how there's a lot of process on how was to avoid this or that amount of emissions individually. And then we have just, okay, now it's time for another armament race. Why not? So we have some nice industries, and they have the goal to tell us that the production of weapons is greener now than it was 10 years ago. And I really have nauseous about that. Sorry, I just feel that I'm just so more happy for this project for this last years, and I'm so much more pessimistic regarding the planet than 4 years ago. Hugs to all of you.
Thank you, Lisa, for those reflections. Ayşem, please.
Thanks. I wanted to share with you something that relates both to the current war and a little bit what I would like to do in the future. Because a couple of years ago, actually, just right when the pandemic hits, I was asking Marco if it would be okay to develop an artistic research collaboration, which then didn't take place because it was basically about walking. And if I may, I would like to share 2 slides with you that I didn't have the chance to share before. Would that be fine?
Yes, yeah.
I don't know if I managed. Can you let me know?
Yes, Ayşem, I see a slide.
Thank you. We started doing this because Ayşem is a good friend and a collaborator of mine for a long time. She's an artist based in Vienna and Istanbul. And she was already organizing shared walks as a public participation in walking as an art form kind of project. And in that project, they were making people who come from very different backgrounds, having different challenges, walk in the streets of Vienna and organizing a new way of looking at the city. And we decided to take this methodology and apply it to climate change, which we have in the last year. And at some point, I would really like to share this with you whenever we actually can physically come together and do one of the walks. But you can also just download it from the sharedwalks.com website and use it with your students and so on. I open my courses as a bit of an icebreaker with this and try to use it in order to understand new cities that the students come to, as well as how they feel about climate change. And basically you walk in pairs and you experience different people's emotions, but also politics, public spaces, economy, and so forth. And this has been a great fun to do. And now we have come up with a new version of the cards called Futures to look at the future imaginaries of how climate change and environmental transitions are shaping people's imaginaries of politics and so forth. And Ayşem and I have started to talk about recently how the immigrants that are necessarily going to end up in Stockholm can slowly be integrated into the city by use of this method as we develop it. So this is something that I'm working on, and I would be interested in being involved in more artistic research collaborations of this kind of things.
Thank you, Ayşem. I shared the link in the chat for anyone who's interested, and thanks for you've mentioned the project before, but thanks for reminding us about it. That's great. Okay, I wonder if we will wrap up now. Quite a bit delayed, but it was a good reason for it. It was a great reason for it. It's been great for everyone who joined us today and to hear everybody's experience. So thank you so much for this, and we'll make the recording available and make sure that you know where to see it. Just and it will be on the atlas on the website. And again, if there's any questions, just contact the lab or any of us that were a part of the project. Is there anything else we need to say, Marco?
Thank you. And again, a lot of apologies. We are, I can say that we are in a different, time zone. We can pretend, we can make up some, lie, but we are just late. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for being with us, and especially thank you because I see a very good energy. I see something that will happen, and I to tell you the truth, I really don't like the idea of this, projects that start and end when the funds are over. I think it's also a little bit sometimes extractive, even because you work with the community and then you leave because the project is done, but the community is still there. So we are still there with the communities we have been working with. Thank you so much. And I should really say one last very quick thing. I really want to thank Anja. She joined us, not many, a lot of time ago. And I feel that she has been always with us. And I am still thinking, how could I have done anything without her? So yes, big thank to Anja. And see you around.
See you.
And Anja, maybe we can stop